everybody. Thank you very much for coming here. Now, for those of you who heard Richard and I speaking this afternoon, you already know how proud we are of our mother and of Chris, and how happy we are to be welcoming Chris and Peter into our family. For those of you who weren't there to listen to our speech this afternoon, congratulations on avoiding it.
This evening, instead of repeating everything we said earlier today, we would like instead to tell you all a story. This is the story of how Natalie and Chris met. It is the story of their first date, in fact.
Now, many of you will have heard a story from either Mum or from Chris about their first date, but I'm sorry to tell you all, this is actually a lie. In fact, it is a cover story.
For you to truly understand the story of how these two met, you first have to know their origin stories.
Natalie was born into a life of wealth and privilege. But she hasn't let that hold her back. The first woman to attend Eton, she was soon rubbing shoulders with the great and the good among high society. Saudi princes, future British leaders, Keith Chegwin. She graduated from Oxford with a double first in nursing and espionage, and was recruited straight out of university by MI5 to be trained as a hand-to-hand combat expert, an elite sniper, and a gentleman spy. She specialised in coming up with new and inventive ways of disposing of her targets. Where's Roy? After years of training in rifle assemblage and how to order a martini while sounding superior, her handler decided that the perfect cover story for a ruthless assassin would be to pose as a nurse at Papworth Hospital. She was now a cold-blooded killer. Code name, Natalie Hypertension Doughty.
Chris, on the other hand, was born into a poor travelling family of freelance coal miners, and spent his early years learning to hate the bourgeoisie and everything they stood for. After dropping out of Northampton Polytechnic University, where he was studying geology and class struggle, Chris developed a hatred for education which still lasts to this day. He decided instead to pursue a career in alternative music. The 70s and 80s were a wonderful time to be a musician for Chris and his band, the Rock Samplers. He experimented with many musical styles, and soon found that his particular brand of punk rock, neo-romantic and slash metal fusion was to prove a hit with a disaffected countercultural youth.
Natalie, meanwhile, was putting her spy training to use behind the scenes. With her cover story intact, she was able to influence international policy with key world leaders. Margaret Thatcher, Vladimir Putin, King Joffrey. But Natalie's influence was not just restricted to politics. She was responsible for some of the most nefarious decisions made over the last 20 years. The decision to invade Iraq, changing marathon to Snickers, and the plot to the Star Wars prequels. Chris, meanwhile, was getting sick of the celebrity lifestyle.
After his last album, a collection of reggae-style hymn covers failed to reach the top 10, Chris decided to turn his back on music. Instead, he dedicated himself to causes he believed in. As a staunch socio-anarchist proletarian, Chris was firmly on the side of the people. He joined the Socialist Workers' Party and was promptly sent to Germany to train with the Baader-Meinhof gang. Chris's politics only became more left-wing, eventually leaving the Red Army faction, accusing them of being too moderate. He returned to the UK and spent several years selling The Socialist Worker on the angry streets of Yardley Hastings, where he ironically became their bestseller and therefore had to quit for becoming a capitalist lapdog. This freed up his time to incite anti-establishment hatred in leafy suburban FE colleges in Northamptonshire. He soon became known to the authorities as a troublemaker. After starting a violent student uprising over which ones are stalagmites and stalactites,
the authorities had had enough. It was at this time that Natalie was assigned to take Chris out. She planned and trained for months for the job. Parachute training, infiltrating the Rotary Club, becoming fluent in FE speak,
Chris, meanwhile, was blissfully unaware of his fate. Marking papers, smoking bongs, covering classes he has absolutely zero knowledge of.
Then the day finally came. After luring Chris to a leafy rural pub with a fake post on Match.com, she lay in wait. When the time came, however, Mum found that she couldn't bring herself to do it. She found herself drawn to Chris.
She had never not finished a job before, but this was special. Unbeknownst to her handlers, she threw away the gun and ran to Chris. And they immediately hit it off.
They renounced their jobs as assassin and proletarian antagonist, instead settling down under the assumed identities we know them by today.
But that was years ago, as we all know. And we all know that Chris and Natalie have gone on to change the world.
Chris now runs a chain of successful academy colleges, mentoring a new generation of young people and indoctrinating them with his own curriculum of firebrand socialist politics.
Natalie became health secretary, simultaneously curing pulmonary hypertension, giving men the pain of childbirth, and legislating to require that nurses and politicians are paid the same wage. She continues to influence international policy, but has given up her career as an assassin, we think.
This is not the story they tell of how they met, of course. Instead, they tell a quite frankly ridiculous story of Mum arriving for her first date with no money and no petrol, and she had to phone her son-in-law Andrew to come and rescue her. But, I mean, who would believe that? Inconceivable.
So now you know the truth behind Natalie and Chris's romance, and we ask you all to stand and to raise a glass.
Mum, we are both so proud of you. You look wonderful today, and on behalf of everyone here who loves you, we can honestly say that no one deserves happiness as much as you.
Chris, welcome to the family. We couldn't be prouder to have you as a part of our family, and also how you make our mother so happy. We thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, to Natalie and Chris. Please be seated. Thank you very much.